Thank you, everybody. Oh, it's a good service, isn't it, this? I love an all-generation service. And you know what? I know that in kids last week, you started learning about worship, okay? So a little bit like in kids, if you are in our Neon program, do you want to come and sit down at the front here? And I'm going to ask you to come and sit down here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Jack and Alice to come up together with a best listener who's going to get points for their team next week. Okay, so I don't know if you've got teams or if you're just doing individual points, but whatever it is, you're looking for a best listener, okay? So, we're talking about faith today, and we're going to have a think about praying some bold prayers after this, because we're going to expand our understanding of what this word faith is all about. But I want to start off by telling you a little story about me, okay? Because I've not been preaching for that long, so you don't all know all my secrets just yet, so we're good. We're on a roll. But when it comes to going on a family holiday, one of my favourite parts of going on holiday is the journey, the going to where you're going, okay? And it's stopping off at those places that you wouldn't ordinarily see, okay? So a couple of years ago, we were on our way to Cornwall, and on our way there, we stopped at a place called Taunton, and in Taunton, there were some beautiful gardens, and in Taunton, in these gardens, we saw this most magnificent, gigantic oak tree. It was absolutely beautiful, and whilst we were there, we were able to see that it was planted in like 1902 for Edward VII. It was absolutely brilliant. Whilst we were there, we also saw this beautiful fountain that was built in honour of Queen Victoria. It was absolutely gorgeous. James and I, we've been up to Scotland, and on the way there, if you just go over the Scottish border, there are some lay-bys that you can pull into, and you can get out and admire the views of the beautiful North Sea and just the expanse of the wonderful creation there is up there. A few years ago, we were on our way to Cornwall, different trip, but we stopped off at Gloucester, and we were able to visit the shop that inspired the Tailor of Gloucester story by Beatrix Potter. It's absolutely amazing. And I love finding these places of interest, things that have something different and unusual about them. But here's the thing. On these journeys, on our way to our holiday, if we hadn't have stopped at these different places, we wouldn't have seen the trees, we wouldn't have seen the views, we wouldn't have had these moments built into our journey that we remembered. And what I want to do today, because we're all on different parts of the journey of faith, we're all on different stages of what we understand by faith, and I want to take us on a journey today when it comes to exploring and learning a little bit more and understanding more about faith. So we're going to come to some stopping points on the way, so it's a little bit like my kind of journey. Okay, we're going to stop, we're going to absorb, we're going to reflect, and we're going to hopefully remember some things that are going to build ourselves up with when it comes to faith. And unlike the journeys that you guys may go on in your car, and maybe some of you guys as well, maybe we like to put the earpods in. Maybe we like to drift off, hopefully, if we're not driving at this point. Okay? But I want to encourage us not to drift off, not to tune out, but actually let's pay attention to the places that we're going to stop this afternoon. Okay, so faith, according to the dictionary, is described as this. It's complete trust or confidence in someone or something. It implies that there's a certainty even when there is no evidence or proof. Okay, and then when we look at it from a Christian point of view, when we bring sort of God into the mix, we can understand faith to be something more, okay? It's to do with God saying that, or understanding that we know God will do what he says he will do. Faith is understanding that God has a plan and a purpose, and we come to a place where we put our faith, we put our trust in God to do what he says he will do. And I love that definition, that idea that faith is building up a picture of who God is. Okay, faith is building up an experience and an understanding of the way God works and the way that God moves. You know, we live knowing that God will do what he says he will do. We can look back and go, well, God didn't fail me then. We sung it, haven't we? He won't fail. We look back and we go, God, You did this then, and I know you'll do this now. And you know what? At this point, you might be there going, I don't know what God says he'll do. I don't know what his promises are. I don't know what he says over my life. And if that's the case, then why not find somebody who's a little bit further along on the journey than you, and I should go to them and say, what does God promise? And you know what? Even better, you can grab a Bible and you can start having a look in there, because that's where you will find the promises that God makes to us. So our first stopping point today on our journey is simply this, that we are all built with a capacity for faith in our hearts. We all have a capacity in our hearts for faith. And you know what? Faith is something that's already in you. When you're born, you are born with a capacity for faith. And I want to remind us this afternoon that even if we've been a Christian a long time, we all have a greater capacity for faith. We all put our trust and our confidence in something, don't we? You know, whether it's the bus driver, the promise of a friend, that the alarm's going to go off in the morning, or, you know, when it gets to those times of year where it needs to go forward or backwards an hour. Yeah, we all have our trust in the digital clocks, don't we? But faith doesn't just end there. Actually, there's a biblical view as well, and that's what we're going to have a little look at just for the next few minutes. So the Bible tells us this about faith. We read in the book of Matthew about a time when Jesus has been up on a mountaintop with his disciples, and he's been transfigured, okay? He's had this amazing experience where he's been able to chat to Elijah and to Moses, and he's come down the mountain after having this wonderful experience. And here's what happens. It says, at the foot of the mountain, a large crowd was waiting for them. A man came and knelt before Jesus and said, Lord, have mercy on my son. He has seizures and he suffers terribly. He often falls into fire or into water. So I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him. Jesus said, you faithless people, how long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you? How many mums, women identify with this at this moment in time? Kids or other halves say, I can't do it, I can't find it, bring it here. You know, we've got all that to contend with. Imagine Jesus saying that to you. Jesus says, bring the boy here to me. And then he rebuked the demon in the boy, and it left him. From that moment, the boy was well. Afterward, the disciples asked Jesus privately, why couldn't we cast out the demon? And Jesus replies, you don't have enough faith. I tell you the truth, if you had faith, even as small as a mustard seed, and you all got a chance to hold and look at a mustard seed earlier, faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say this to the mountain, move from here to there, and it would move. Nothing would be impossible. And I think that's so challenging, isn't it? When we know that we've got this capacity for faith. The disciples had a capacity for faith, but it was their unbelief that caused them to not be able to heal the boy. The disciples had been given the power and authority to perform this amazing miracle, but they didn't have enough faith. And I don't think that the issue was that it was a small faith, because we know that from looking at a mustard seed, it's really small, isn't it? It's not the size of the faith that's the thing, but it's about the kind of faith that you have that is the key, that's important. Actually, the disciples' faith wasn't strong enough. It wasn't reliant on God. That's the key. You know, their faith needed to be strong. It needed to be placed in God. They needed to remember that their faith wasn't about them, and it wasn't about their power, but it was about God's strength. And that's why they couldn't heal the boy. And like the disciples, we too have a deeper capacity for a new level of faith, you know, especially when it comes to trusting and believing God for the things that maybe we hope for and the things that we haven't yet seen. And I like to think of our capacity for faith a little bit like those expandable camping bottles, or, you know, those collapsible washing up bowls. Any campers in the house? I'm not looking at Louise, because Louise says no. So like the collapsible bottles and the collapsible bowls, actually, they get stretched. They have a more capacity than what they first seem. When you first buy them, they're quite small and scrunched up. But actually, the more you use them, the more you get to know it. You bring it out and you expand it. And our faith is just like that. And it's surprising with those things how much you can fit in them. It's surprising how much faith can fit inside you. So for you and me, I want to, encourage us this afternoon that, our faith might start off small, especially with God, because he's looking for relationship and he wants to work and move in our lives. But the more we spend time with him, the more we spend time with each other, we build one another up, we encourage one another. Our faith is then going to grow. A little bit like the seeds in the video at the beginning. They had potential, didn't they, to become something else. Our faith, it's already in us. It has the potential to grow into something stronger and deeper. And it's going to be something that helps us to rely more on God and not our own strength. So our first point of interest today is that faith is already in our hearts. We just need to help it grow. Okay, a little bit later on in the Bible it says this: if you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is by believing in your heart that you're made right with God, and it is by openly declaring your faith that you are saved. So you believe in your heart. We've got the capacity for faith. But then our second stopping point is simply this, that our faith needs to be confessed. Our faith needs to be spoken out. It can't just stay in our heart. We need to transfer it to our mouths and we need to speak it out. And that's what we were doing earlier when we were singing Who Won't Fail. Actually, we're putting our faith and trust in God. That's the important thing about where we put our faith. We can turn to God privately and with others within church, and we can learn more about who God is, and we can allow our faith in our hearts to grow stronger. And that's going to then give us that confidence to say to the mountains, the things, the issues in our life, and we can go, actually, you're not meant to be here. You need to move in the name of Jesus, because we're putting our trust in here. We say to the mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing would be impossible. And you know what? I want to say to us this afternoon that it's important to speak out our faith over ourselves, over our lives, over our church, and over others, because the enemy, we might refer to him as the devil or as Satan, he knows our weak spots. He knows those places that are going to try and shake our faith. But if we speak out our faith, actually the enemy has to run, he has to flee, because he can't stand the truth of the Bible. He knows the truth of the Bible, but actually what is going to happen is he's going to flee from us, because that is going to provide the right environment for our faith to grow and be strengthened. We need to make sure that we're putting ourselves in a position where we speak out our faith, so that we can have a strengthened faith. Romans 10:10 in the Message says, we're simply calling out to God and trusting him. We're declaring what we believe. So our second point of interest, the place we're stopping at second today, is that we need to speak out the faith that's in our hearts out loud, so that we can make space for God to move, so that we can experience the power and presence of Jesus in our lives. And the third and final stopping point that we're going to visit this afternoon is that just as the faith in our heart is confessed, it's then going to impact the way that we live. The more that we learn about God, the more we learn how he works, the more we trust him, the more he will begin to move in us and through us, and that will then change how we act. We'll no longer be led by fear, but we'll be led by faith. We will act accordingly. If we know that God's come through for us before, we sing those songs, he's my firm foundation, he won't fail, all those kind of songs that we sing, we know that they can be true, and actually we can then begin to live in the faith and the trust of God, because we can act in that faith, not out of fear. We've got that song that says, you never failed me yet as well. And we might go through trials, but we can begin to speak out that God has good plans, that we're more than conquerors, that we're loved, that we're the head, not the tail. All those promises we can begin to speak out as we help our faith to grow, and as we speak it out, and that then helps us to become dependent on God, and we know that he will never fail us. So we've had a whistle-stop tour this afternoon, and on our journey we've thought about these three things. That number one, we're all built with a capacity for faith. Are we going to remain collapsed like the camping bottles or the camping bowls? Are we going to remain small, or are we going to allow our faith to be stretched? Are we then going to, on our second part of the journey, are we going to get to that place where we speak out our faith, not just keep it inside, but are we going to encourage our faith to become something that comes out of our mouth? You know, even if it's as small as a mustard seed, as long as it's strong and as long as it's placed in God, that's the key. You can have the smallest amount of faith, but God wants us to place that in him, not in the ways of man. And then as faith in our heart, as the faith in our hearts is confessed, it's going to impact our actions and the way that we live, ready to demonstrate our faith, and we live knowing that God will not fail us. You know, our faith affects our head, our heart, our voice, our hands and our feet. And if we're going to stretch our faith to its greatest capacity, then we need to not only realize that we can contain an incredible amount of faith, but we need to speak it out, and we need to put our faith in God into action. I'm just going to invite James and the band out.